Really good to see you. And this evening we're going to go on a journey, a very interesting journey about a very difficult question. And our topic is the secret of a ritva. Man stands on earth and he touches heaven. This is actually the title of my book. And the question is like this. It says that for 3 years, Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, they argued. They had a machloket according to who the halacha is going to be ruled. Okay, and so they had a very big debate for 3 years. Beit Shammai said the halacha is according to me, and Beit Hillel said the halacha is according to me. And so it says, this is a very famous Gemara that all of you know. And so it says that a heavenly voice went forth and declared, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. These and those, both the views, are the words of a living God. But the halacha follows Beit Hillel. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim, the halacha ke Beit Hillel. So if this is what it says in the Gemara. Now, what question, a very difficult question, you could ask about this Gemara?
If both opinions are right, how do we decide?
Absolutely, right. If wait, this actually contradicts itself. Okay, if a halacha is ruled according to Beit Hillel, how could we say that the two of the views could be equally correct? Yeah, what do you say?
Well, I have a question. In a situation like this, are we expected to take the story literally? As in, this is fact, this happened, you can't argue that this did not happen, this happened. Or could we say, the story as is written in the Gemara is a representation of what happened, or it may have not happened, but there's a deeper meaning to why it's said the way it is. How are we supposed to interpret the story? For whether or not, or the truthfulness of the story first. Well, that's my first question.
So it's a good question what you ask. So it is a true that in the Talmud there are stories called Agadot Chazal. For example, like the stories of the Rabbi Bar Chana. He had all kinds of very strange voyages, as mentioned in the tractate of the Baba Batra. And those, of course, can't be taken literally at all. But this story, why shouldn't it be taken literally?
Why is this problematic?
So the problem is, if it says that both of the views are equally correct, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim, how could the halacha be according to one of the views? Because that if the halacha is according to Beit Hillel, so it seemingly means that the view of a Beit Shammai is incorrect, right?
No, why? Why can't one be Haredi and one be Dati Lomi?
I remember reading Rabbi in the Tanya, learned in the introduction, a bit why are the differences in this, that they might touch on different people's souls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe that's what he's saying.
Yeah, like you can have two different people with two different truths.
Exactly, has a very different truth than someone who lives in Monroe.
His hair is kosher, even though it's very different to mine. And my hair is kosher, even though it's very different to his. Both abide by the rules of peyot. I don't know if mine.
Well, in this example, follows the rules of payos.
We're talking about halakha. Like there must be one clear halakha for everybody to follow.
No, not so.
Of course.
Yeah, but it's gotta be like if it's kosher or not kosher.
Course. No, that's not how it works.
Of course it works like that.
But it's not like is it kosher or is it not
One clear
kosher. It's gotta be either kosher or
No,
not
there
kosher.
isn't.
This is the way to
It's not the way it
go,
works at all.
and we should not.
I mean, like,
No, within the halachic system, there
Are those Pringles kosher? Are those Pringles kosher? Everyone in
Within-
this room would say yes, but there definitely exist people here in the state of Israel that would say, no, I don't. Those Pringles do not satisfy me. The kashrus on it, I don't know that. I don't necessarily know the hechsher.
OU.
It's always
One of the best
okay.
actors in the world.
There's people that don't like OU, believe it or not.
Within the halachic system, there's multiplicity of perspectives, and both are correct. Both are not, but both are acceptable,
What the rabbi
That's
said.
right.
and not just both.
70
panim of the Torah, 70 are acceptable. So, is this applicable to the Gemara, or am I completely off left of field?
So, first of all, you are completely correct that in these days there are different views because we don't have a Sanhedrin. We don't have a Sanhedrin that rules that the halakha is specifically like this. But in those days, we are talking about 2,000 years ago, and it even says in the Mishnah that after it was decided that the halakha is according to Beit Hillel, one isn't allowed to go according to a Beit Shammai. For example, there's a famous example in the tractate of Brachot. It says about a Kriyat Shema. It says b'shochbecha uvekomecha. So Beit Hillel understood it that a b'shochbecha, it is the time when people would go to bed, right? So it means when it is dark outside, so people go to bed.
The beginning of the Mishnah, like the very beginning of the Mishnah.
Right. So in these days there's electricity, so people go to bed at midnight, right? But in those days they used to go to bed when it gets dark. So Beit Hillel say b'shoch becha, but Beit Shammai, they actually explain that it is you actually have to lie down when you will say a Kriyat Shema. And there's a story of a Rabbi Tarfon who decided to go according to a Beit Shammai, even though the halakha was according to a Beit Hillel, because for a Beit Hillel with the majority. And it says that he was traveling, and then he lay down at the time of a Kriyat Shema, and then bandits came and they almost killed him. And he was miraculously saved, and then he told the story to his colleagues, and they told him, you deserved to be almost killed but you went against Beit Hillel and you went according to a Beit Shammai. Because of the halakha was according to a Beit Hillel, how can you go according to Beit Shammai? Yeah.
Doesn't Rabbi Shimon Levi also uses the term in the Gemara late? He curses one who sleeps and also recites Kriya Shema Pragdan, right? Is that also in the same context? In Brachos.
That is a different
thing.
A different context at all.
Okay.
But so regarding your question, nowadays it is different because nowadays we don't have Sanhedrin, and there are different views based on the Shulchan Aruch. There are all kinds of different views because of the reality changes, and there are newer concepts about electricity and the technology, and now we have houses that they have all kinds of sensors, and the question is, how do you
Smart home.
a smart home, right?
Like a Google home.
That's
It's
right.
the most lazy
So
thing in the world. People don't even know how to walk.
that's right. So
Rabbi Natan Kotler is like the worst thing. They don't know how to bake an omelet.
It's like a Wally.
Yeah.
With the-
so it's a very big question. How do you relate to it according to the halakha? Like on a Shabbat, it is very difficult for a very difficult for a halachic Jew to we walk around without a smart home, and then suddenly lights come on, and then the music goes on. So what do you do?
When I went back to America for a quick vacation to see my parents, I was walking back from shul, and I was walking in just on the sidewalk, and my neighbor's motion activated lights went on.
That
So
is
it's
difficult.
obviously it wasn't a malacha because it wasn't my fault. I know knowing that they had motion activated lights, but still, it's the same thing. And of course, motion activated lights have been around since like I don't know, they probably came out in the 70s or 80s. So
that's right.
This is not a particularly old issue or a particularly new issue.
That's right. But even on the halachic definition of electricity, there is also a debate about it. There's a famous book of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach called Me'orei Esh.
He's right there. The man of truth and peace.
That's right. And then he decided not to publish it because he didn't want there to be a big argument about it. And so nowadays, there is machloket. But when we are talking about the story of the Beit Hillel and the Beit Shammai, the halacha was ruled according to Beit Hillel because they were the majority. So one isn't allowed to go according to Beit Shammai. And so the question is, if the heavenly voice said that the halacha is according to Beit Hillel, how could the heavenly voice also say Elu v'elu v'divrei Elokim Chaim, that these and those both views are the words of Hashem? How can two views be equally correct? This is the question which we are going to try and understand.
Very amazing question, Rabbi. It's a very big question. It's a trivial question, really. It's the wisdom of the Torah, no, Rabbi?
So soon we are going to see there's a secret about it. There's a secret about it called the secret of a Ritva. But first, let's say you try and explore it, okay? And we're going to see a couple of answers. We're going to see a suggestion of a few answers. So the first answer you could see on page 1. In the future, we might rule the halacha according to the view that was previously turned down. And so, this is what it says in the Mishnah of Eduyot. You could see in the source too. Because you can ask the same question about every Mishnah in the Talmud. Every single Mishnah in the Shas. Isn't only the bottom line, okay? The halacha is according to kach v'kach, okay? Such and such. The Mishnah brings both of the views. So why does the Mishnah bring both of the views? So this is what the And it says in the source too. We know that the halacha is according to the majority. So if it says why do we have a single view? Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could potentially, maybe it's just my fault, but maybe would it be possible to just crystallize the question slightly, just so I can understand it?
Yeah, sure. So the question is, it is actually a philosophical question. The halacha is the truth, okay?
Yeah.
And then,
is halacha the truth?
Well,
because, what's truth? Relax. Because halacha is an
evolutionary. Brother.
Halacha is an evolutionary process, as we know in the Messiah.
It's still based on halacha bishman. It's based off.
So is the truth evolutionary?
So that is a good question. That is a good question as well, because. And I'm going.
I mean, halacha. We obviously believe halacha is the truth, but it goes through an evolutionary process.
And soon we are going to see that there is a difference between a godly truth and human truth.
Can we distinguish it by like halacha d'oraisa and halacha d'rabbanan?
No. That is something else. But what I mean is that soon we are going to see that there is a machloket. We saw it actually last week. The famous sugya of the Tanuro Shel Achnai, right? That it says that Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, they had a big debate about this oven, about the Tanuro Shel Achnai. Him say Mekabel Tum'ah or not, and the question, and then it says that a heavenly voice came out and said that the halacha is according to Rabbi Eliezer.
Yeah, sure. That's like 156, Baba, one of the Babas.
That's right. It is in the Baba Metzia, and then it says that the sages weren't impressed with the heavenly voice. They said, no, we do not go according to the heavenly voice, because it says, Lo b'shamayim hi, the halacha isn't in heaven. So even if Hashem himself says that this is the halacha, we don't listen to it. Because what Hashem said in the Torah, that we go according to the majority. The halacha is according to the majority, even if it isn't according to the godly truth. So we could see that there is a difference between the truth according to human beings, the sages, of course, and the godly truth. And we are going to see momentarily, I am giving it all away, but this is the secret of Ritva. We're going to talk about it, but since you asked it, I'm going to say it, that there was a bigger debate about giving the Torah to man, to human beings. So the angels opposed.
The Shavuot, the Gemara of Shavuot in Shabbos.
That's right. If the angel said, how could you give the Torah to men? Now wait, what does it mean to give a Torah to human beings? The Torah talks about us. It is for human beings to. So the answer is that what actually did the angels oppose? They opposed giving man the authority to determine what the halacha is, because for the human beings it could be mistaken, right? So there is a difference. We're going to talk about this all later, but there is a very big difference between godly truth and human truth, according to the sages. and so you are correct when you say that the halacha, saying that it is the complete truth. It is not the complete truth, but according to the rules of the Torah that Hashem gave it to man, it is the complete truth. Okay?
Which is based on Harav Ishmael, right, Rabbi?
What?
Which is based on Harav Ishmael, no? We said before, Hodu Hashem Kito Ishmael.
That's right. Right, Machon.
That's how we base out the Gemara.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So, to summarize the question, if we say that the halacha is according to one view, how could we say Elu v'Elu divrei Elokim chayim, that both of the views are equally correct? How could they be equally correct if the halacha is according to one view? Does that make more sense?
Yes, if it was exclusively one view. But I think in our fragmented Orthodox world, one view is often halacha l'maisa, not so pashut. Just look at the difference in, like, for instance, kitniot and Pesach, or any other sort of thing. It's often that you have the mechaber and you have the ramah, and then you have the shach and the taz. So, I mean, maybe it's not so. Yeah, but you have and the shach and the taz will quote different sources the entire time about what is the halacha given this particular set of circumstances. So, like, and they'll quote the Rambam, and then they'll quote someone else, like the poskim. I'm evading my mind, but then you see there are practical nafkaminas in between opinions, and you can be right in all of them. So maybe your particular point refers to as a Gemara paskins in some instances, but and maybe what I'm saying is halacha l'maisa, we have diversity, a plurality, a multiplicity of opinions. And maybe that's enough in between our points. I would just simply say that, if you look at modern day reality, no, very rarely I think, do we have one halacha. Because then you don't always even have to look at how poskim paskin or the achronim paskin. You look at the circumstance. Circumstantial differentiation is ever present. So the halacha will adapt for that particular thing. Say a hefsed muruba, a shasad chak, or any other number of these situations that will change things. So very rarely do you have one halacha for everything. I don't know if I'm adding complexity or to your point, but
absolutely, it is. It is excellent what you were saying. You were saying very important things that really make it understandable. Yes, absolutely. So we're going to see at the end the idea of Elu v'Elu divrei Elokim chayim, that it teaches us about the respect that we have to have for different views, and that even in the view that perhaps isn't according to the halacha, which in these days it isn't the case, because in these days we don't have a Sanhedrin, and we cannot really determine what the halacha actually is. At the time of the Gemara, they used to vote about it. They used to put the issue to vote, and the majority used to determine what the halacha is. This is what the Sanhedrin used to do. It says nimnu, and then they decided what the halacha was. So in these days, this is a great problem. In fact, we have in these days that there are so many different views. As you said, there's the Shulchan Aruch, and there's the Ramah, and there's all kinds of different views. And we don't have any single authority that could rule and say, this is the halacha. and it causes many problems these days. So, but nevertheless, the same idea applies also in those days of a Beit Hillel and a Beit Shammai, and also in these days, the idea of the respect to other views and to see the grain of truth in every view, which we're going to see momentarily. And so first, let's see the first answer. The first answer is that in the future we might rule the halacha according to the view that was previously turned down. So this is what it says in the Mishnah of Eduyot in a source 2. It says, "V'lama mazkirin divrei hayachid ben hamerubim." Why the mention of the singular view among the majority? Ho'il ve'ena halacha ela k'divrei hamerubim, because the halacha is according to the majority. Answer: She'im yireh beit din divrei hayachid v'yismoch alav. The Tosfot Shant explains that there might be a different generation, that there would be a new majority, that the reality has changed, and they would understand the halacha in a different way, and then the majority would go according to the view that was rejected. So that's why it is always important to understand both of the views. Okay? Now, of course, it is important to note that this is talking about the time of the Tanaim and the Amoraim, but the Kesef Mishneh, a very important commentator on the Rambam, he says that the Achronim, the sages in the later generations, they aren't allowed to go against what the sages in the previous generation said. And so all of this is only true to a certain time in the history of the Jewish people. At the time of the Amoraim, even the Amoraim, they can't go against the Tanaim. But in the generations of the Amoraim, there could be a different majority against the Amorah in the previous generations. Now, there is a Kabbalistic tradition which is important to mention. It is based on the pupils of the Arizal, that they say that la'atid lavo, in the future generations, the halacha is going to be according to Beit Shammai. Okay?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, absolutely. Kabbalistic.
However, there is a very big question mark about that. Now, I know that it is a very famous, but people mention it, but one should know that the Mesilat Yesharim says that this is incorrect, that the halacha is always going to be according to a Beit Hillel.
How can we go about Mesilat Yesharim as opposed to Midrash?
It is not a midrash. It is not a midrash. It is
Mesilat
could
Yesharim
see-
was made by the Ramchal, who was almost putting the Chayrim compared to the
That's
Midrash.
right. There isn't any midrash about that. You could see in the Yisor say 7, and this is the earliest Yisor that I found from the 17th century. Who says there's a bit difficult to read it because it's a very old printing, but it says that the halacha in the future generations is going to be according to Beit Shammai. But underneath that, we could see in the Mesilat Yesharim, it says that sof kosof nigmar she'halacha kebeit Hillel le'olam, that forever the halacha is going to be according to Beit Hillel. And where did the Mesilat Yesharim get that from? Underneath that, you will see in the Talmud Yerushalmi, Talmud, it says, אבל מי שיצאת בת כל לעולם הלכה כדברי בית הלל. וכל העובר על דברי בית הלל חייב מיתה. That whoever goes against Beit Hillel and goes according to Beit Shammai is sentenced to death. So it is, of course. It doesn't mean that the court is going to kill him, but spiritually it means. תנא יצאתה בת קול ואמר אלו ואלו דברי אלוקים חיים הם, אבל הלכה כבית הלל לעולם. Forever the halacha is going to be according to Beit Hillel. So there's a very big question about the Kabbalistic tradition that I mentioned earlier, that the halacha is going to be according to Beit Shammai la'atid lavo, according to the Yerushalmi, according to the Mesilat Yesharim. This is impossible. But what do you say?
No, I think you answered my question. It's interesting. Do we go by the Yerushalmi or do we go by the Midrash? I'm not sure where they would halachic or where they would.
There's no midrash about that. There's no midrash
about Beit Shammai.
There's no midrash. There's a Kabbalistic tradition from the 1700. No. From the 17th century. We don't know of any earlier tradition than that.
About Beit Shammai?
No. That the halacha is going to be according to a Beit Shammai in the future generations.
And the first source of that is the 1700s.
Right.
So why does that have credibility?
It doesn't if you bring the Talmud Yerushalmi and the Mesilat Yesharim together. So
why the Chidush at all? Like that would be, I mean, like, yeah, sort of like a very
that's a good
random
question.
thing to say.
I don't know. I don't know what the logic is behind it, because they can go against the Yerushalmi, but this is a question that I do not know. I don't know the answer. So now, if you turn the page, please, to page 3, and this is something very interesting. Second answer. The argument is vital to the process of ruling the halacha. Now, this is something extraordinary. This is something that is really, really interesting. It says in the Talmud of a Sanhedrin. Now listen to this. Amara the Kahana. I am first going to read it in Aramaic, and then I'm going to translate it into English. In a source 10. Amara Kahana. Sanhedrin שראו כולן לחובה פותרים אותו. מהי טעמה כיוון דגמירי הלנת דין מעבד לי זכותה, והנה איתו לא חזו לי. Rav Kahana said, if all the judges of a Sanhedrin saw fit to convict a defendant, he is a credit. What is the reason? For we have learned that where the vote is to convict, an overnight delay of the court proceedings is required in order to give the judges an opportunity to find a basis on which to acquit the defendant. So, this is something I call extraordinary. If in the Sanhedrin, all of the judges, they say together, he's guilty, he is guilty. So the halakha is, he is not guilty. This is incomprehensible, right? If all the judges together, they say he's guilty, the halakha is, he's not guilty. How could that be? Answer is that
Because it's a bit. I mean,
What?
I think I've come across this before.
the answer.
Maybe because the Sanhedrin unanimously can't be so sure of something, it would indicate perhaps their corruption or perhaps something else.
That's right.
That would potentially part of the person.
That's right. If the argument is vital for the process of ruling for halakha. If there's no argument, there's something fishy about this.
So it's so funny because that would almost be like groupthink is asur.
Right? Yes.
Why is that so? Groupthink. It's like a term when a culture believes. Everyone in a culture believes.
According to Judaism, there has to be different views. There has to be an argument. If there is no argument, there's something strange about
You go
this.
into some communities and Dafka, there's nothing to argue about.
I'm glad to hear that a Jew's favorite hobby is not only allowed but encouraged. It's very good to hear.
There's a famous story of that. There was once a community that they were all the time arguing. They were all the time arguing about the question if a minhag, if a tradition is to stand during a Kriyat Torah or to sit during a Kriyat Torah. So they were arguing until they decided to ask the Rav. Okay, so they came to the Rav and they asked him, is the minhag to stand during a Kriyat Torah? So the Rav shook his head and said, no, this is not the minhag. So they asked him, is the minhag, what did I say before?
Sit.
Okay.
Yeah.
To sit during a Kriyat Torah. So we checked all his books. He said, no, this is not the minhag. So we said, what should we do? We are all the time arguing.
You should listen.
The Rav said, that is the minhag. The minhag is to argue. Okay? So...
But in Judaism, if it's L'Shem Shamayim, so fully Yitkayem.
Right,
It's written in the Pirkei Avot.
That's right. That is important to say.
As long as it's L'Shem Shamayim.
As long as it's not
We're going to talk about that. Right.
The Shem Shemayim to the opposing view. I don't know if that was a necessary comment or not, but the point is that you can have multiple different perspectives on something, and that can be part of the process.
That's right.
If it's just like Shem Shemayim all the time, like that can lead to a sense of
right.
Machamas Hashem within Jewish context, which is probably counterproductive.
If it's
That's
L'Shem
right.
Shamayim all the time,
Mm-hmm.
how would that be leading to something that's not
Depends what
L'Shem
you mean by
Shamayim?
Shem Shemayim.
Or maybe it's not really L'Shem Shamayim, it's just the Tachposet, it's just the cosm.
I don't know.
Me either.
You can have both Shem Shemayim and be respectful of each other. You can have
That's
Shem
right.
Shemayim and not be respectful of each other. That's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But by that, it's not L'Shem Shamayim, right? Because if it was really L'Shem Shamayim, there would be respect, there would be kavod. Right?
Depends how you find Shem Shemayim.
Yeah.
So this is the answer to this big question of that. If all of the judges decided that he's guilty, he is not guilty, and they have to release him because that he is. Because there was no argument, there was no process in trying to understand the different views.
Is that halacha relevant to Dayanis or a Beit Din? Like in say they come like Nizikin or like what I forget the term of the place in Shulchan Aruch what it's called, but like damages, conflict, monetary disputes. Does there need to be conflict in the Beit Din, or need to be an evaluation? Like it need to be a sense of. I mean, how does this halacha factor into that process? It's a very naive question, but does that factor into the Beit Din process at all? About, or is it like, or does not really? I mean,
well, this is you're talking about a dinei nefashot, that the dinei nefashot, it is the sentence of death, and if all of a Sanhedrin they are completely sure that he is guilty, he's not guilty, but we are against the conformity, and if they're unable to find the smallest zchut, the smallest
merit,
right, so this is something strange, and this is what Rashi says. Rashi says over here that you could see in the source 11 that they have to find some kind of zchut. If they don't find any zchut, so he has to be released. Okay.
In terms of the responsibility that is placed upon a dayan, is there any sort of way that the responsibility is weighed out between the dayanim, or is it usually placed on one dayan, like the dayan arashi, or it's all the responsibility to
you're together.
It's together.
Beit Din is you're together. There is even a view that the minority in the Beit Din, that they say that he is a Yechayav, okay, and the majority say that he is a Yepator, so they aren't allowed afterwards to where you go to him and say, look, we really wanted it to say such and such, but the majority decided otherwise. This isn't allowed to, because a Beit Din functions as one whole organism.
So
one whole entity.
So I'm not sure if I missed the point, but
one bite.
But this is only matters of nafashot, not like it doesn't. It's not
right.
Matters of other Beit Din.
That's right. That's right. This is about a nefashot. Right.
So you can have complete conformity in a Beit Din, or a lack of, say, rigorous questioning, and then you would still be acceptable with the judgment. I mean, maybe
this
maybe
is specifically about a nefashot, but it's a good question. If it applies also to a dinei mamonot, I do not know, but all of the sources here you could see from a source 10 until a source 16, they all talk about a dinei nefashot. I didn't see that they apply this rule also to a dinei mamonot.
Would there be like a respectable Rishon or a Rishon that might extrapolate the meaning of this? The
I don't
relevance
know.
of it?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I do not know. But it's a very good question. So we could see it from here. If you look at a source 18, so it says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi, אף הקדוש ברוך הוא אין דן יחידי, שנאמר כל צבא השמיים עומד עליו מימינו ומשמאלו. אלו מתאים לכף זכות, ואלו מתאים לכף חובה. So even in the heavenly court, there is a machloket, teaching us that a machloket, an argument, is vital for the process of the ruling of a halacha and of discovering what the truth is. Because that without a machloket, there is no truth. Okay, so now we are going to skip the third answer, and we are going to go straight to page 5, the fourth answer, and we're going to talk about the secret of the ritva.
What does matin lakaf schus mean? Is that like din dan lakaf schus? Is that
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
exact same thing?
Matim leyakaf schut, it means that they favor the schut.
Right.
Matin, it is like a
I mean,
scale.
It's a really important point. You're saying that everything has to be evaluated, even those points where we have less proclivity to, even those points that are less obvious or less even probable, has to be taken into consideration.
That's right.
Whole 3D sort of context, sort of like the whole sort of situation has to be evaluated.
And this is why the halakha was ruled according to Beit Hillel, because it says in the Gemara of Eruvin that Beit Hillel, they used to study the view of Beit Shammai. They used to try and understand what Beit Shammai were thinking about. Why did they say what they said? And because they studied the view of the Beit Shammai, they really tried to understand them. That is why the halacha is according to Beit Hillel, because they took all the different views into account. Okay. So now we arrived at the core of our shiur today, and this is the secret of the Ritva. This is something extraordinary. And then the Ritva says, as we mentioned earlier, that a Chazal, you tell us that a Beit Hillel and a Beit Shammai, they argued during 3 years according to whom is the halacha, and it is told that a heavenly voice said, Elu divrei Elokim chaim, and then the Ritva asks, in the name of the sages of France, how is it possible that two contradicting views can be equally correct? Right? This was the question that we asked. And so what the Ritva says, he says like this. He brings the answer of the sages of France, and he says that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to heaven to receive the Torah, Hashem showed him that there were many different ways of understanding the Torah. You could see it in the source 24. Okay, ותרצו, כי כשעלה משה למרום לקבל את התורה, הראו לו על כל דבר מ"ט פנים לאיסור ומ"ט פנים להיתר. On everything Hashem showed him different ways in order to understand the Torah. And this is according that so he asked Hashem, ושאל על הקדוש ברוך הוא על זה, ואמר שיהיה זה מסור לחכמי ישראל שבכל דור ודור יהיה הכרעה כמותם. So it says, the translation is, that in order that the sages of Israel in every generation will have the authority to decide according to which way of understanding is the halakha. Okay? And then the Ritva adds another sentence. ונכון הוא לפי הדרש, ובדרך האמת שיש טעם בסוד בדבר. This is correct according to the Drash. However, according to the path of truth, it is a sod, a secret, meaning in the matter. So, what is the secret? What is Eva Ritva trying to tell us? So, as I mentioned earlier, the famous Gemara on a Shabbat, as you mentioned, you could see it in a source of 27. ואמר רבי יהושע בן לוי, בשעה שעלה משה למרום, אמרו מלאכי השרת לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ריבונו של עולם, מה לילוד אישה בינינו? אמר להם לקבל תורה בה, אמרו לפניו, חמדה גנוזה לך 974 דורות. קודם שנברא העולם, אתה מבקש לתנה לבשר ודם? מה אנוש כי תזכרנו ובן אדם כי תפקרנו? So, when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, it says that the angels opposed. They said, how could you give the Torah to men? If you give the Torah to men, it is going to be a catastrophe. Because the why? What bothered the angels so much? Why did they oppose the giving of the Torah to man? So what do you think? Why? What was the big problem of the angels?
Because it's a chemda gnuza. They don't want it to go down to the world. They see the great holiness of the Torah, and they don't want the. We already know the answer. What happens? We receive the Torah, but they think that the Torah is not exactly viable for this world. It's something so holy and precious to God, it should stay up with the Kadosh Baruch Hu.
But the Torah talks about man. The Torah talks.
It's exactly why we got it, right?
To man, it is the story that Hashem is talking it to man. So the answer is that the angels did not oppose a giving the Torah to man, not only the right to keep the Torah, but the authority to interpret the Torah and to rule the halacha. This the angels opposed.
Wow.
They didn't mind that man is going to study the Torah and to understand what it says. But the authority to determine what the halacha is, the angels opposed that, because they said, how could you give the Torah to man? Because that man, human beings are not objective creatures. They are liable to be mistaken when they try to interpret the Torah. So the angel said, but it would be a grave mistake to give man the authority to rule the Torah. They wanted to let man study the Torah, but the authority is going to stay in heaven, because that human beings are liable to make mistakes, even purposely. So, the angels have a good argument, right? Human beings do make mistakes, right? Human beings aren't objective creatures, right?
I've been ready.
So, the angels are right. They raise a good argument, right? So, how do you answer the angels? We have to answer the angels, or unless
Moshe
the
Rabbeinu,
authority,
right?
what?
Didn't Moshe Rabbeinu answer the angels?
Ah.
He said about is there ta'ava in you? Is there l'titzach? How are you going to mekayem that?
Nachon. But before that, there's another answer. But first, I would like to hear you. How do you answer the angels? The angels raise a good question, right? A good argument.
I want to be an answer. I know.
What?
Without Moshe Rabbeinu's answer, it would be a very hard answer.
Okay, so listen to this. This is amazing. So it says, look in source 34. Okay, it is on page 7. Okay, 34. Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe hachzir lem tshuva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it to Moshe Rabbeinu, answer the angels, or I will not give you the Torah. Okay? Amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam mitjareh ani shema yisrafuni behevel shepihem. I am scared of him, okay? They could burn me from their breath, okay? Amar lo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it to Moshe Rabbeinu, Echoz bekisei kvodi vechazor lehem tshuva. Okay? Hashem told him, hold on to kisei hakavod, my throne of glory, and give them, the angels, an answer. Now, what is the meaning of a holding on to the throne? Okay? The answer is that Hashem is telling us a great secret. Now, picture this. Moshe Rabbeinu is standing on earth, okay? And what is he doing?
Arguing.
Touching heaven. He's standing on earth and he's touching heaven. This is the answer. Hashem is telling us a great secret, that despite the fact that human beings are not objective, however, when we learn Torah, we are able to touch heaven. The ability of Moshe Rabbeinu to hold on to the throne is in itself the answer to the angels. Hashem has faith in man. One time, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of the so he was interviewed by Sir David Frost, and then Sir David Frost asked him a very difficult question. He asked him, Chief Rabbi, do you believe in God, or do you know that God exists? So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs answered him. He answered him like this: that the greatest news is that God believes in man. So we could see actually from this is a story of a Moshe Rabbeinu and what Hashem said, that man has got his faults. A man is not objective. Man can make great mistakes. However, Hashem believes in us, so that when we study Torah, we touch heaven. And then we are able to reach the truth despite our human disabilities. When we study Torah, something extraordinary happens. We are able to stand on earth and touch heaven, because this is the power of the Torah. And this is indeed a big secret, because the Ritva said that there's a secret about this. How can man reach the truth of the Torah, even though he has earthly desires? But this is the secret of the creation of man. On one side, man is flesh and blood. However, on the other side, man is
holy.
That's right. Man is a created of God. On one side, the body of man is from earth, but on the other side, the soul of man is from heaven and is carried from beneath the kisei hakavod. This is what Hashem said. Hold on to the kisei hakavod and answer the question, because when you study Torah, your soul, your neshama that is part of heaven is connected to the Torah. So when a Talmidei Chachamim study Torah, they touch heaven, and they merit to understand the truth of the Torah, Amitah shel Torah. So this is a very big, secret. So the confidence and the potential of man is the secret. And then it says that Hashem also will learn the Torah with us. When, as it says, this is extraordinary, because that you know that during the Corona, all of the yeshivas were closed, right? And then most of us were confined to our homes, and then
Quarantine.
That's right, and then
Craziness.
we had to study Torah by ourselves. But it says, Afilu, look at the Yisor 40. It says in the Pirkei Avot, מניין שאפילו אחד שיושב ועוסק בתורה, שהקדוש ברוך הוא וזהו קובע לו שכר. And it says, but if you two people study Torah, so it says, Shechina b'nem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with them. So, why does this answer the question that we started with? How does the secret of the Ritva answer the question? Because what we ask, if there's two contradicting views, how could they be both correct? Okay? If a halacha is only according to one view, because these are two contradicting views, how could they both be correct? So the Ritva says that both of the views, the sages who are arguing, each of them is a standing on earth and they are touching heaven. And both of them are able to link in to this great truth of the Torah, and they are able to touch heaven. And that's why we should respect the other view, because they are also touching heaven. So this is a very important understanding also about the nature of machloket, and also of how to relate to other views, the views that we don't agree with, views that they contradict our view. But as God has faith in man, also we should have faith in others who study Torah and who reach other conclusions than we do, because the faith is the key word here. The confidence and the potential of man is the key to the secret. If a man stands on earth and it touches heaven. So, if there's any questions, any comments, any
wonderful class, Rabbi. I just had one comment here.
Yeah, sure.
I really enjoyed the different opinions that you brought in here with all the different sources. I really enjoyed it in the class, Rabbi. You are melakit a bunch of different sources. I really enjoy that. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks. Thank you.
יישר כוח.
Chazak